Wait a minute, ladies and gentlemen. I have breaking news into the Fireball Review. The Texas Rangers have just announced that they will play all 162 games next season and any playoff games on the road. Greetings, baseball fans, and welcome to the Fireball Review. Well, folks, sadly, another baseball season has come to a conclusion. However, if I told you way back in spring training that one team would get to the World Series and win the World Series, however, they would lose their best pitcher, Jacob deGrom, a quarter of the way through the regular season for the rest of the season due to injury. Then they would acquire Max Scherzer at the trade deadline from the New York Mets, only to lose him to injury in the waning weeks of a heated pennant race with their much-hated cross-state rival, the Houston Astros, lose their best hitter, Corey Seager, during that pennant race for 5 weeks down the stretch, lose Aroldis Garcia, their second best hitter in the last 2 games of the World Series. Then Scherzer gets hurt in that very same game. He's out the rest of the World Series. A team that would lose 100-plus games 2 seasons ago, 94 last season. A squad with one of the worst bullpens in all of baseball this year. These guys were absolutely horrible. They couldn't get anybody out. At least in the regular season they couldn't. A team that would bring in arguably the greatest manager in the history of the game in Bruce Bochy. But Bochy's been out of the game for 3 seasons. He was up there in Nashville, Tennessee on like a country and western karaoke dance team of some sort. Whatever the hell they do up there in Nashville, Tennessee, I don't know. But if I told you that this team would have to win 11 straight road playoff games to win the World Series, if I told you that this team would have to do all these things, they would have to overcome all these things to win the World Series and do it, you guys would probably have me fitted for a straitjacket and checked into the local nut house.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
But it happened. All of it happened, and after 63 long seasons, the Texas Rangers have finally won the World Series. Congratulations, Ranger fans. Enjoy this all over Arlington and Fort Worth and Dallas and all of Texas and all over the country and all over the world. You've earned this. It is very hard winning a World Series. I don't need to tell you this. They were one of only 6 teams to have never won the World Series. The Padres have never won the World Series. The Brewers, the Rockies, the Rays, and the Mariners. The Mariners still haven't even appeared in a World Series, so that's very embarrassing. But today's all about the Texas Rangers and Corey Seager, the man that wins the World Series MVP, his second World Series MVP. He won back in 2020 with the Dodgers. And let me tell you something about this man, ladies and gentlemen. This guy I thought was about 35, 36 years of age. It seems like he's been around forever. I thought he was playing when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. He's only 29 years old. If he maybe puts together 2 or 3 more All-Star years, heaven forbid he wins an MVP at some point in time, this guy's a surefire Hall of Famer. I don't know if he's quite there yet. He's kind of a borderline candidate with his regular season numbers, and I'm a small Hall guy. I think there's guys in the Hall of Fame, personally, that I don't think should be in there. I think you should just be able to hear a guy's name and say Hall of Famer. The only exception I have is if you're kind of a borderline guy with your regular season statistics, but you're otherworldly when you get into the playoffs. Let me explain. Like a guy like Jack Morris or Curt Schilling. I know Curt Schilling's not in there. I think Schilling should be in there. But those guys didn't quite have the regular season numbers to make the Hall of Fame. But what those guys did when they got into the postseason was just out of this world. These guys would just take it up another notch. Corey Seager is the position player equivalent to these gentlemen, and I think the guy might end up in the Hall of Fame one day. And while Corey Seager definitely deserved that World Series MVP, let me tell you something. The unsung heroes of this World Series for the Texas Rangers, believe it or not, was the Texas Rangers bullpen. These guys, I said going into the World Series, this would be what would cost them the World Series. This is why I picked the Diamondbacks. I thought the Rangers bullpen would completely collapse in this series, and it ended up being their greatest strength. Because, let's face it, the Rangers starting pitching outside of Eovaldi in Game 5 was not particularly good in this series. Eovaldi didn't pitch that well in Game 1. Game 2, Jordan Montgomery, who had been their best pitcher by far throughout the playoffs this far. This guy pitched like an ace throughout the entire playoffs. He was terrible in Game 2 and in Game 3. Scherzer got hurt. Game 4 was basically a bullpen game. And then even in Game 5, as well as Eovaldi pitched, the last 3 innings, the Rangers bullpen just came in and shut the door. Give these guys a lot of credit. They took a lot of crap from people like me, and they deserve a giant pat in the back. You know, bullpens in the playoffs and in the World Series, they're like offensive linemen in the Super Bowl. They don't get a lot of credit, but I noticed, and they did a hell of a job, these guys. But let's get down to brass tacks here. I said before the postseason commenced that if Bruce Bochy guided the Texas Rangers to the World Series, let alone won the World Series, that he would go down as the greatest manager of all time. And that's a separate video I need to do in the near future, because it deserves several minutes of discussion. But let me tell you something, folks. Look at over the changes the Texas Rangers made in the offseason. I mean, they pretty much brought back the same team they had last year that won 94 games. I know they had a few additions and some subtractions here and there, but the biggest change was Bruce Bochy. And in an era where managers don't seem to matter anymore in baseball, it's all about the nerdy, calculus professors up in the GM office, and we have to do everything these guys say. And if we don't do everything these guys say, the world will come to an end. Oh my God, we have to take out a pitcher after he throws 40 pitches in the 3rd inning of a playoff game that he's absolutely dominating. If we don't do this, the world will come down to a crashing halt. Let the managers manage the team. Now, on the Arizona Diamondbacks side, you guys know in my World Series preview video, I picked these guys to win the World Series in 7 games. Big mistake. Pretty much every series in this postseason went the opposite way of the way I predicted it would go. I would have been better off flipping a coin before each series. I would have had a much better record. I think a lot of people were in this boat. Unfortunately, all of my picks are posted here on YouTube for the whole world to see, so that's very embarrassing. But with Arizona, you knew their strength was the bullpen going into the World Series, but it was like the Rangers bullpen and the Diamondbacks bullpen like switched uniforms, and the Rangers became the Diamondbacks and the Diamondbacks became the Rangers. It was a very odd thing. I think the Diamondbacks just sort of ran out of gas. They relied so heavily on that bullpen in the first 3 rounds. And I think when they got into the World Series, these guys were a little bit gassed, and it just didn't work out. They needed to have a good bullpen showing in this series to win the World Series. It didn't happen. And the Diamondbacks always got timely hitting in the first 3 rounds. They didn't get it this time around. They just couldn't get that big hit at any point in time. They couldn't run. They couldn't manufacture runs the way they normally do. The starting pitching was probably their strength for the most part. I actually think the Diamondbacks starting pitching was better than the Rangers starting pitching in this series, even though it only went 5 games. But again, a big congratulations to the Texas Rangers. 63 long years you guys have waited. The Rangers started off as the Senators in Washington for the first 10 years of that franchise, then moved to Texas in the early 70s. Ted Williams, arguably the greatest hitter of all time, was the manager, the first Texas Rangers manager. I remember in the 80s, guys like Juan Gonzalez and Ruben Sierra and Rafael Palmeiro. I was actually at Nolan Ryan's 6 no-hitter when he was pitching for the Rangers. I was in Oakland that night. It was one of my favorite baseball moments. I was only a little kid, and I actually witnessed in person that game. And then you go to the 90s and early 2000s, guys like Hank Blaylock. And then later on, obviously, they have the 2010 World Series that they lose to Bruce Bochy, ironically enough, and the Giants. And then in 2011, have that heartbreak, that ball just out of the reach of Nelson Cruz. They were 1 out away from the World Series, and they've had numerous years, the last few years, where they just have not been a very good team, and they finally broke through this year and won the World Series. Congratulations. Enjoy this. You never know when it's going to happen again. In closing, I'm wearing this cowboy hat in honor of the great state of Texas, because I know in the state of Texas that football has always been king, with Friday Night Lights and the high school teams down there, all the great college football teams, the long history of the Dallas Cowboys winning Super Bowls. But the Cowboys have been mediocre to bad for several years now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And the Houston Texans are basically like the Colorado Rockies of the NFL. They never seem to win anything. So I'm calling it now. Baseball is king in Texas now. The Astros won the World Series last year. The Rangers won it this year. So it is a beautiful thing to see baseball taking over the great state of Texas. And now I want to hear from you guys. Let me know down in the comments below. Is Corey Seager a Hall of Famer yet? Or is he on that trajectory path? let me know down below. And as always, hit that dislike button if you didn't like this video. Otherwise, see you next time. Toodles.